So my video on sex and gender has received its fair amount of quality criticism, which I have done my best to censor.
Hi Michael, this is the first time we've met, but I watched your multiple genders video and I have some genuine criticism of my own. Firstly, you seem to be using sex and gender in a way that implies that they mean the same thing. Gender is a social term used to identify people and treat them appropriately. Sex is the biological binary that people fit into, which is either male or female. You covered intersex in your first video, but you appeared to confuse that with transgender. Therefore, the basis of your argument in that video is invalid. But I'm not going to talk anymore about your last video. It's this one that's got my attention.
So that was fun. I learned a few things. Number one, I don't understand science.
Literally none of those YouTube comments you showed before say this, so I can only assume you realize that the majority of people are trolls, right? I know you can block audience interaction, but doesn't that prove to them you can't handle it? The point of you not understanding science is valid, as you prefaced your last video by saying you're a man of science, but then persisted to conflate it with social science, which are two separate things. I've said it before, but social science is not the same as science. In fact, science often opposes social science as it is based on logical thought and to prove hypotheses with repeatable methods. That's why most scientists aren't ideologues of any sort.
But a guy on the internet who doesn't understand consent or copyright law is an expert.
The proclaimed expert here is Baring, who, if you haven't, I suggest you check out. I've never heard Baring say anything about consent, but it could be possible. However, considering the nature of Michael and other SJWs in his circle, I'd say the quotes were taken out of context. As for the copyright laws, only people who take your words as gospel would believe this, Michael. Baring did use an image of a copyrighted bear and altered it, but due to his channel's takedown, he has since changed his avatar, which was also done by his partner Sugar Tits. To anyone listening, if you like Baring, you should also check out Sugar Tits' channel. Anyway, continue your narrative, Michael.
Number two, there are only two sexes. The rest are deformities, so that's nice.
I kept the clip playing longer so I didn't have to stare at your clear attempt at conflating the issue with ableism or transphobia. Also, I noticed your caption of the black guy as the worst. Are you sure you're not the racist ones, Michael? Baring covered the sexual abnormalities in his first response, so I'll leave that for him, but let me say this in terms you may understand. Your moustache sits a little off center. Would you call this a new facial hair design?
Three, I learned a new word, and that word is TransTrender. Now, what the fuck does that mean, you might rightly ask? Well, dear friend, let's ask the internet. As you can see here, Urban Dictionary defines transtrender as a person who identifies as male or female but does not experience any gender dysphoria. It can also mean someone who identifies as male or female because they think it's trendy/cool. The first thing I found hilarious about this word is the people who use this term are probably the same people who get upset at SJWs for making up new words.
So here we go. This is where your video really starts what it says in the title and your first point really disproves itself. Let me explain why. You start by defining it using the Urban Dictionary, which I dare say isn't a true dictionary source. It's like Wikipedia for high schoolers. I would argue that this isn't a real word, Michael, so don't feel too worried. Afterwards, you posit that this was probably done by anti-SJWs, which is where you start to unravel. I think it would be fair to say that for anti-SJWs to have created this word and posted other than to troll would be seriously uncharacteristic of them. If you're going to justify your accusation with probability, then let me raise you this. Would it not be more probable that the social justice warriors themselves made this word? My first point is that by your admission of transgender identity, the new word can now be classified as a gendered word. Second, gendered words that are specific to a particular group, such as mansplaining and manspreading, came from feminists. Third, lesbians are a large voice in the feminist community. Now, by the definitions of intersectional feminism, men are the oppressors of society. Therefore, if some men have chosen the female gender to identify as, it could be seen as them adopting a transgender identity without having any gender dysphoria. Furthermore, there seems to be a divide on YouTube amongst lesbian feminists and non-lesbian feminists when it comes to transgender, with trans men in particular being the cause for concern. If you do a little digging on YouTube, you will find a transgender woman claiming that she is a lesbian. There is contention with this because the heterosexual norm is that men are attracted to women. I know I'm getting a little too in-depth here, but my point is this. Don't just blindly accuse people who don't agree with you just to suit your own argument.
And the second, which is not so funny, it's just straight up transphobic.
Whether transtrender is a real word or not, it is by no means a transphobic word. It simply means people may identify as trans to elevate their social status and therefore do not struggle in the way that regular transgender people do.
The assertion that you're not trans unless you experience gender dysphoria is just plain wrong.
It is wrong, Michael, you're right. But the fact is, this definition on the Urban Dictionary was likely written by a troll or a high school student, and it was rated by about 500 people. You policing the Urban Dictionary on words isn't going to work.
In fact, the definition of these things was recently changed in the DSM so that trans folk would no longer be classed as mentally ill. Similar to how back in the 70s homosexuality had its definition changed so that homosexuals were not classed as mentally ill.
That's good to hear, Michael, but it doesn't have anything to do with TransTrender or your original argument. You argued that more than two sexes exist. This isn't true.
Basically, you can be trans and not experience gender dysphoria, which is a disturbance or distress which can arise as a result of one's trans nature. Some even posit that societal pressures, norms, and expectations can be part of the reason why some trans folk experience gender dysphoria.
I agree with the societal norm stuff, but Michael, you are literally trying to redefine a made-up word. Nowhere in the Urban Dictionary page that defines transgender says that they aren't really transgender. Transitioning genders for social reasons does not mean they aren't trans.
And the second part is equally as stupid. Who are you to decide whether someone is doing something because it's trendy or cool?
I'm not. I don't use the word. On that though, who are you to decide that people who don't support social justice are racist, sexist bigots? Don't want you to trip on that double standard you have, so I thought I'd point it out.
Why are you the one who decides if someone is a real trans or, like a fake trans?
I'm not. Unfortunately for you, neither is the definition of this made-up word, Michael.
It kind of reminds me of those people who say they know what real racism is, and it's not the things that they're doing that is causing people to call them racist, it's actually the people who are calling them racist who are the racist ones.
Well, as a disgraced white male from the patriarchy, you should well understand the hatred we have for people who aren't straight white men. Jokes aside, when you are called a racist by a black person, how do you respond? Racism is brought up as a defensive wall that blocks the person saying it from hearing anything they dislike. I can't wait for your video explaining why you are a racist, sexist white man because some black feminist said so.
Someone on Twitter actually said to me that there are more TransTrenders than actual trans folk.
Aside from the middle tweet, Sean McNeil might be right, and the middle tweet doesn't discredit his statement. According to the definition of this made-up word, if you don't go through gender dysphoria, then you are a transtrender. Again, Michael, don't take this word too seriously.
How could you possibly know that? How would you... what? What? Who knew that the arbiters of who is trans and who's not is actually assholes on the internet and, not trans people themselves?
I'm going to cut it here because all Michael does at this point is mock the hypothetical situation. In future videos, I'll hopefully go more into his mannerisms, particularly when he's discussing opposing viewpoints. That said, I don't intend to focus too hard on this man-child until he does something entertaining. Patriarchy Perspective out.